Welcome, citizens of Gotham, to The Fire Rises, a Batman podcast focusing on all things The Dark Knight and his world. If you'd like to connect with the show, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at TFRBatPod. And if you have thoughts, questions, comments, or even suggestions for the show, you can reach us by email at tfrbatpod@gmail.com. My name is Eric Carter, and I am your host, and I am joined once again and as always by my co-host, Mr. Joseph Fornerado. Joe, we are late this time, but how are you?
I'm doing good. I had a week to recover from all the homework that I did to prepare for this episode.
Oh yeah, the tremendous amount of homework I gave you to do.
Listen, I reread Nightfall in its entirety. I reread the entirety of Tom King's Batman run. I mean, I did all that
Mm,
in a matter of a week. I think that's pretty good.
mm,
And I'm a
mm.
complete liar, obviously.
Imagine, imagine the Anchorman Will Ferrell gif right now. I don't believe you.
I don't believe myself saying it. That's there's no way. But
Well, Joe, you kind of buried the lead there just a tiny bit, so some people might have an idea. Which, if you saw the title of the episode, you know what we're covering anyway. But that's right, it's an anniversary, and this is a way late anniversary. But we were looking for things to discuss, and I realized that we were way late on this because this year marks the 30th anniversary of the man who broke the bat, Bane. So we are here to talk about one of the I I would say he's become a pretty iconic Batman villain, and that is Bane. Joe, I don't know, just to kind of start off there with Bane. That's a great question. Like, where do you kind of put him amongst the rogues gallery, the villain assortment for Batman?
well, it was funny the minute you started talking about like where he ranks and how he's become this iconic villain. It's pretty crazy to think how quickly he made it into a film from when he was first brought into the comics. I mean, it was only 4 years between 93 and Batman and Robin. And he was known as the man that broke the bat right away. That was how he was described to me when I heard he was going to be in Batman and Robin. He was the one that broke Batman's back. And he's been known for that ever since. And you will get into it. You could argue that's still what he's best known for, and he might have peaked at his first appearance if you ask some people. But I would put him, if we go right into like tiers, I would say like B list maybe. I mean, I don't think he's an A, but I still think he's pretty close to it. I don't know, where do you feel on that, or where do you fall on that?
So it's funny you said that, especially about the time it took him to transition from page to screen, because he got on the big screen quicker than Harley Quinn did.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
a
unless
lot
you
quicker.
count,
I mean, is he the quickest? Like, I mean, without counting like the serials and even the '66
I would say
show,
yes.
even the
I mean,
'60s, the '66 movie. You could argue some of the characters on the TV show. I'm sure some of them were pretty instant, but as far as like a feature film, he's got to be the quickest. And I'm sure we're
yeah,
missing
I would think
somebody
so.
obvious, but he's the first one that pops to my head where you think of like quickest turnaround.
Now, it's arguable. Maybe they should have waited a little longer
Well,
because
yeah,
the results
you
were
could argue he wasn't really on screen until 2012.
yeah, yeah. So, but anyway, back to your question. I really, really like Bane. I have multiple statues, multiple Funkos. I'm pretty big on Bane. Um, he ranks he ranks pretty high for me. He's like in my top 5 of Batman villains.
Mm-hmm.
So I do consider him an A-lister, just because, I mean, how many other villains, like recent villains, can you count that came in and made that big of an impact immediately
Mm-hmm.
on the character and on his, on his mythos? I mean, possibly the next ones after the next, villain or villain group after him was Court of Owls, right? Has there been a villain between there that made a huge impact and stuck around?
Yeah, it's hard to think of that stuff off the top of my head because, and not even to get into a tangent
But
with
there's
like the
not
Court of
one that
Owls.
readily comes to mind, though, is what I'm
No,
saying.
other than like what you said with the Court of Owls, but I still like it's hard for me because I guess the way I do the list is a little different where I still always just consider the A list are the ones that have been there forever. And I don't think anyone will ever like get into that A list. Like as much as I love the Court of Owls, to me they're not A list yet. Like and I don't think they ever will be. I think the A list will always be Joker, Penguin, Two-Face, Riddler, Catwoman. I think those are like my only A lists. Like that's it. Like I don't think it
We'll
can.
see. We'll see. And everybody ranks it differently, and
Yeah.
it's all completely up to you. But I know a lot of people put Penguin there just because he's always been there. He was one of the big four in the '66 series. He was one of the original villains in the Batman movie series and all that. And I love Penguin, but like whenever Bane pops up in a Batman comic,
It's a big
I
deal.
get a little bit of sense. I get a sense of dread
Yes.
for Batman. I don't get that when I see penguins popping up in a comic.
Well, that's
Like
the thing is like
penguins
everything
almost
changes.
become that. Yeah, penguins almost become. He's become that constant. Like he's always there, but he's never the big bad anymore. He's kind of the secondary player. He's the informant almost for Batman at this point. So I don't know. For some, I feel just me personally, Bane has more impact at this point than Penguin does,
Yeah,
and
and
that
I
is
can't argue that.
ultimately subjective.
Yeah, and I can't argue it
Yeah.
though because you're right. Like it seems like every time Bane shows up, it has to be an event because he is such a formidable foe for Batman. Where Penguin has kind of
Mhm.
I don't even. This sounds like such a negative thing to say about Penguin, but it's almost like Penguin has devolved as a character over the years. And I don't even think that like I don't mean that as a bad thing because I think he's utilized to his strengths at this point, but you'd like to see him more prevalent. And again, I don't want to go on a tangent with Penguin. We're talking about Bane here, but just in comparison, Bane has he does have that impact every time he shows up.
Mhm. Yeah, because I mean, it's something that even if you don't like the stories, and we'll talk about some of those later, but even like some of the most recent Bane stories, like he comes in and every time Bane appears, it's something awful happens.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that's why I say, I get almost like I said a sense of dread when I know that Bane is the upcoming big bad in a comic run for Batman. But we'll get into different stories and things like that. But I did want to go over kind of the history and when like kind of our history with Bane. So he was created. Basically, he was created for the Nightfall story, but they did something kind of interesting, and they gave him kind of his own backstory before he hit the main Batman title, and that was Vengeance of Bane in January of '93. So we are a few months late, but we're talking about it in the 30-year range. So I still think we're good, Joe. Uh, but I did want to like before you saw Batman and Robin. Had you already seen Bane in the animated series, or did you know anything about Bane at that time? What's your history with Bane?
Um, to be honest with you, I totally forgot. Yeah, I had to have seen him in the animated series prior because yeah, he appeared in the animated series
Mhm.
in what 94, 95, something like that. Because it was season
Something
two.
like that, yeah.
I had to have seen him there first. But my my first introduction to Bane was funnily enough, the junior novel Nightfall and Beyond.
Oh
Um,
wow, I don't think I knew that was a thing, to be honest.
it was like a junior novel adaptation of the graphic novel of Nightfall, and it was just one of those things where I saw it, and it wasn't because I know there's a Denny O'Neil adaptation with like the bat logo. It's like a circle bat yellow oval logo on the front of it. I didn't have that one. I had this one. It had like a black cover with like a cool like silhouette of Batman, but like he looked darker and his face was covered. It was very artistic. It wasn't, I don't think, anything that reflected how he looked in the book or anything like that. I want to say like he was even holding a different cowl. It was weird. I'm trying to find a picture and send it to you, but it was just one of those things where I saw the book
Mm.
in like a Barnes and Noble, and I thought, oh, that looks really cool. And I've read the book, and I had no idea what was going on in the book because I had no idea who Azrael was. Like I didn't know what was going on in the book, and I remember just learning that about the broken bat or the broken back and all that stuff. But I was still a little kid. I didn't really even comprehend what I was reading. But that was my first introduction to
Hmm.
Bane, which was a really weird way to be introduced to him.
Yeah. So for me, unfortunately, like my most vivid memory of the first time like I really recognized, you know, knowing Bane was Batman and Robin. And I know I had to have seen the Batman the Animated Series episodes, kind of like you said, but it doesn't stick, front of mind like remembering seeing Bane and Batman and Robin. And I do remember because in the '90s, I was a big wrestling kid. I loved WWF at the time. And I remember that, not a huge fan of Batman and Robin, even at that age. But I remember just thinking, I love Bane's mask. I thought it was really cool. It kind of looks like a luchador mask, right?
Yeah.
So I always really, really liked that mask because it was like almost like I saw hints of like Rey Mysterio in there. I saw hints of Spider-Man in there, just the angles and the lines of the eyes and the way that mask looks always stood out to me. So I always kind of liked Bane, even the crappy Jeep Svensson version who, who walked around going bomb, um, which is a terrible representation of Bane. But I will say, other than like the green skin Frankenstein looking characteristic, he looks pretty good in the movie. He just wasn't portrayed very well. But
Yeah.
that's my clearest early memory of Bane is Batman and Robin. And then of course I do remember a couple of years later when I really got into reading comics, I remember reading Vengeance of Bane. I remember reading Nightfall. And yeah, it just that character has always linked to me for some reason because I love that, you know, with Bane, I think it's kind of the don't judge a book by its cover kind of thing, which I very much think is what you do if you just see Batman and Robin and that's what you know of Bane. Because if you were to just see him, he looks like a big, hulking, presence, and you don't always think of intelligence. But under all the mass and the muscle is a extremely intelligent tactician who matches wits with Batman, and I just think that's a really cool concept. So I've always really, really liked Bane.
Yeah, I agree, and that is to me that was always what made Bane much more interesting is his brain to go with the
Mm.
brawn, the way that he could be such an imposing figure on Batman physically, but to complement that with the intelligence that he like him going up against Batman one on one, both of them at their best. Bane looks like he would have a huge advantage already. But the way he's such a tactician in Nightfall to even wear Batman down further, to not even take the chance, it's almost like you think he'd want to go after Batman at his best to prove that he can beat him at his best, but Bane doesn't even care. He just wants to beat him. So he's smart enough to know that and recognize that. So it's pretty cool. And he was so Nightfall's opened up in April, so we're closer to the April anniversary than we are in January. So
Yeah.
we'll go by that. But and also I just want to reiterate. So with the Nightfall and Beyond, I looked at the picture because you know how like your memories are all false, like like your memories play tricks on you. So in the cover that I'm thinking
Hmm.
of, it is actually Azrael in the cover, and it's Azrael holding up a back howl. And I remember just seeing, but Azrael looks really
Oh,
dark and
okay.
scary. And I just remember seeing that as a kid, thinking, "What the heck am I looking at?" Because I just assumed it was Batman. And still to this day,
So is it Azrael in Azrael garb or the
Azrael
Asbat?
as bats, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
and he's in
Okay.
this, but it's a darker suit. It's not Yeah, it's pretty creepy looking. And the Alan Grant did this adaptation that I read, not because I want to say there's also one by Denny O'Neil.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so we've kind of given our thoughts and our earliest recollections of Bane. Now, kind of want to talk about some of like the most impactful stories, memorable stories for each of us, and not necessarily favorite, but if you have any favorites, I'm open to that as well. So, Joe, I don't know if you have any readily available, but what like it is there a story? And I know the answer is probably Nightfall, but is there a story that immediately jumps to mind when you think Bane?
I think it has to be Nightfall. It does. It's just so weird because I can't even say that like you know, unabashedly love the story of Nightfall. I think the concept of Bane, and this might be controversial, still to this day, how many years later, I think the concept of Bane has been far better than the execution of Bane. I think Nightfall in a condensed story, like I think the novel works. I think Nightfall like I don't have the huge omnibus of Nightfall. I have like the original broken back uh graphic novel that's like trade paperback stripped to the bones, like this is all you need. I don't even have the newer versions that came out after that. And then there was like the omnibus on top of it. I am very um simplified with Nightfall. I think it goes on way too long, especially after Bane already breaks Batman. But the core of that
Mm.
story with Bane going after Batman in the first story arc, I think is done really well. It's really cool how you see him systematically go after, beating Batman down before he even gets to the point where he breaks into, the Batcave and does all the stuff that we know. But other than that, I mean, the only other Bane stories, I don't know of any, without taking them all, because there's, I mean, in my opinion, I don't think there are that many. The only other one I can say, without saying the other obvious one, I guess from recent years, I'll say is Legacy. If I remember a little bit of that one, I think Legacy is the one
Oh
where
yeah.
um he's trying to be the legacy for Ra's al Ghul, if I remember right. Right? Like he's trying to basically
Yeah,
take over.
something like that. Yeah, I haven't read it in a long time.
Yeah, I think because he played a big part in those stories where again, like Bane just always played a part in those crossovers. It went from like Contagion and Legacy and what was the one? There was a couple of them in there.
Oh, I can't. I know that Legacy is the sequel to Contagion.
Yeah, so I think it was both of them. I want to say Bane played a part in Legacy.
Yeah, he did. And that's kind of where the link between Ra's al Ghul and Bane. That's kind of where Christopher Nolan tweaked that idea.
Mm-hmm.
For Dark Knight Rises. But yeah, you're right, and that's one I need to reread because I do remember really liking Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, for me, Nightfall is absolutely where my mind goes first. I think you're right. Nightfall stretches on entirely too long, which I know you're a huge fan, but I feel that way about No Man's Land as well.
Oh no,
So
I
I don't
completely
know,
agree. I think No Man's Land might even be worse than Nightfall. I love No Man's
but
Land,
yeah,
but I actually think the novel is This Is All You Need.
yeah, yeah. So completely agree with Nightfall being. I mean, that's where you got to go first. I mean, that's immediately where your mind goes because of the impact that it's left. Having said that, there is a story, and I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's by Gail Simone, and it's called Secret Six, and I love that story. It's sort of a play on like this whole team is basically Suicide Squad rejects,
Mm-hmm.
but Bane is the leader of this group.
Was that done in the New 52?
And like, oh gosh, I can't remember when it came out, to be honest with you, because it feels so standalone.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I was just curious how
yeah, I'd
recent it
have to
was.
look back.
I'll look it up real quick.
Yeah, but I know that like Scandal Savage, who is, of course, Vandal's daughter, she's in the story, and her and Bane kind of develop this close relationship, but Bane really gets to kind of play more than he normally does in this story, because there's not really it's not really him just taking on Batman.
Mhm.
There's a lot more nuance to it, and man, Gail Simone's not always my favorite, but when Gail hits, the stories are great, and I think this one's a hit. So if you haven't read Secret Six, I highly recommend it. Um, but yeah, other than that, there's one major story that I really want to talk about with Bane, and oh gosh, we're going to talk about Tom King. Um, so I do want to know, you read Tom King's entire run, correct, Joe?
Yes.
What did you think of his Bane stuff?
Again, I think the story is really compelling. I think he almost tried to just modernize Nightfall to an extent. And again, I was really excited for it. Um, it was like he tried to do a modernized version of that, and maybe a combination of that and a little bit of Dark Knight Rises in there. Um, I don't know. It's hard because I just don't connect with Tom King's writing of Batman. Uh, but I was so excited, and I think he handles Bane really well. And Bane is scary in that book, and he is intelligent, he is a strategist, but I just felt like, and this might be on me, I'm sorry, I couldn't even tell you where that story went. And I read it twice. Like I don't remember I I don't even remember what came out of it.
Now, are you talking about I Am Bane, or are you talking City of Bane?
Sure. Because I don't even remember what happened with either one. Like
Yeah.
all I remember about the Bane
So,
story is Thomas Wayne. That's not good.
yeah. I'll tell you this. I think Tom King writes Bane, just the character Bane, really, really well. I like how he portrays Bane. Um, and let me tell you, when City of Bane came around, I was super excited for it because I'm that big of a fan of Bane. And I knew that if this was going to be a big event where Bane is kind of taking over the city and everything like that, I was really excited for it, and I was really nervous for Batman. What was going to happen to Batman?
Which is the first one? That City
The
of Bane?
problem, I Am Bane's first. City of Bane was close to the end of King's
Okay,
run.
yeah, I don't remember anything from
Um,
City of Bane. I remember I Am Bane because it was really scary, and I remember him hanging the Bat family and then not knowing
yeah.
what happened after that. And it was weird. And
Well, spoilers. City of Bane is where he snapped Alfred's neck.
oh, that's right. Okay, yeah,
So
yeah. And
yeah.
again, like I just his it's just not for me. Like Tom King is an excellent writer, and I'm not trying to just sit here and complain about the Tom King run on Batman because I've read it because I was interested. His storytelling or like his stories really interest me. They're so compelling. The ideas are all there. It's his way of doing it loses me, and it may be because I'm just not smart enough to follow it. I am fully willing to admit that. Like but I like his miracle, his Mr. Miracle. I loved his vision. Like so, for whatever reason, the way he tells these long stories lose me. I like his limited series a lot better.
Well, here's where I have the problem though. As well as he wrote Bane, his Batman in that Batman run is not a good adversary for Bane.
Hmm.
Like, Bane is a much better character in that Batman arc than Batman
Yeah.
is. And that's a problem because you basically have an absentee Batman the entire time.
Hmm.
and you have a Batman who's often wherever on some beach, you know, playing Magnum PI with Catwoman. And meanwhile, Bane is destroying Gotham and torturing the Bat family and killing Alfred in front of Robin. And Batman's not there
Yeah.
because he's on a date.
Yeah, and listen. We don't
And it
want to.
just like,
We don't want to beat up the arc too much.
no, no, no. I just want to say that my main point was I'm so torn on that story because I love the Bane
Yeah.
stuff. But it's like it can't be one of my favorite stories with Bane
Mhm.
because it just doesn't feel like
It's not like a good
it's
matchup.
on equal footing.
Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
ever read?
Yeah, that was my
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you
No,
ever
go
read
ahead.
Forever? Not Forever Evil. What was it? Arkham. Crap. There was a whole bunch of like side stories going on at that time of Forever Evil. Wasn't there like a side story with the like Arkham inmates and Bane was like the leader of it? Crap. And I'm going on a tangent that I can't even land. Um, I can't remember what it was. It was one of the Forever Evil tie-ins. But were you reading those at any point or no?
I never read Forever Evil. It's
Arkham
definitely a
War.
blind
It was
spot.
Arkham War, and I want to say,
Okay.
I really want to say Bane was a main character, but I didn't read it. I was just curious if you had, so that doesn't really matter anyway. But I want to say he played a pretty big part in that. But I was hoping you had. I was hoping I would jog your memory, but I guess not.
No. Now I will say, I mean, just so far as like getting to know Bane, I don't think there's ever been a better kind of villain backstory comic than Vengeance of Bane. I mean, they really lay out his history in Vengeance, and I think it's great. Um, in fact, I think Vengeance of Bane may be better than Nightfall, in my opinion, because I mean it gets you very excited for what's to come with Bane,
Mm-hmm.
confronting Batman.
Yeah, I did reread Vengeance of
Um,
Bane prior to doing the episode. That was the one thing I really did read last week, and yeah, I hadn't read that in years, and it was fun to reread that and get all the intros to the other characters and see all the torment that Bane went
mhm,
through from being a child. And it doesn't make Bane a sympathetic character because of all the despicable stuff he does going forward, but it's cool to see the creation of this villain and the fact that DC like gave them this huge, it's like a 60 page, I don't know if that's even considered a prestige format book, whatever that was back in the day, um, to introduce the character knowing what they were going to do with them. I think that was smart because it gives you that
mhm,
introduction to the
yeah,
character that is going to play a huge part for years to come.
yeah. Now, Vengeance of Bane 2, not so good.
Yeah, I told you I couldn't
Um,
get through it.
it's yeah, it's boring. And that's never a good sign for a comic. Also, I wanted to bring up. Do you remember him in the very brief appearance he had in Infinite Crisis?
God, and I love Infinite Crisis, but no, I don't remember what he does in Infinite
I
Crisis.
know you do. That's why I bring it up.
Yeah,
The only thing he does in Infinite Crisis, and I think it really regressed the character for a few years there. Um, so funnily enough, Judo Master, not a name you hear often, but
it's
with Peacemaker recently.
is it the female judo
So
master?
Bane, I can't. I don't think so.
Oh,
I think
okay.
it's the male.
Because I just read,
Um,
I was just reading something recently with the female version of Judo Master. So okay, go ahead.
but he's very briefly in it, and I was just doing some research for this episode, and I happened to remember that and looked up the page, and it's just a page of him breaking Judo Master's back over his knee like he did with Batman, and his only dialogue in the story is, "I finally know who I am. I am Bane. I break people."
That's it.
And it's like that's just yeah, it's like that's a really I don't know.
Weird.
It's kind of simplifying Bane, I guess. So,
And it's like, what do you mean you
but
finally
yeah,
know who you are? Like, where did that come from?
yeah. But anyway, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't bring up Tom Hardy. Um, I know. I mean, we talked an entire episode about The Dark Knight Rises, but as much as Jeeps Fenson's version, I don't think did very much justice to Bane. I do think Tom Hardy did an excellent job portraying Bane, and it wasn't the comic book version that we're used to, but he had the brutality, he had the muscle, he had the intelligence. I don't know. I've always liked that portrayal of Bane. And I wanted to let you speak to that for a moment as well, even though we did we did talk about it on the Dark Knight Rises episode.
No, I completely agree. I love Tom Hardy's performance of Bane, and I get it. It's not the comics version. He doesn't have the luchador mask. He's not, I mean, he's not Hispanic. He's he's not this, drug addicted, behemoth that is, pumping himself up before the fights. But I think they did a cool way of showing, they have a cool way of doing like a Nolanized version of it. He still has a mask. It's a scary ass mask that looks cool. And I think they get the core of the character right with the physical imposition and the intelligence. That to me was more important than the luchador mask and the vein and the venom pumping through his veins and all that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I love the movie, but I think Tom Hardy does an excellent job. I love the voice, even though I love the mockery of the voice that we've seen over the years. I still love the original voice, and that kind of reminds me to go into gotta get some props to Bane from Harley Quinn.
Oh my gosh, yeah, he's one of my favorite characters from that show. He's so
Talk about
funny.
polar opposite,
Uh,
but yeah, I before we get to that, I I love I love Tom Hardy as Bane, and I think to me, I don't think, and maybe this is a little far fetched, but I don't feel, despite my criticisms of Tom King's Bane, I think Nolan's Bane kind of brought him back to being taken seriously in the comics and being made more for his brains than just his brawn. So I like that he almost legitimized them again. And I think people were more willing to change his look a little bit in the comics to fit that militarized look as opposed to
mhm.
the wrestler. And I like his look now in the comics where it's a hybrid between like the Dark Knight Rises and still having the luchador mask in some form. I think it works really well that way. I love the look that Tom King gave him, and Tom King and all his mix of artists that he had. I think they did a really good job with that.
Yeah, I agree. I'll give it to that run. I think Bane has looked better than he ever has in the comics before.
Mm-hmm.
So I will give you that. But yeah, as to not go back to that, I do I did want to agree with you, man. The kind of piss take Tom Hardy voice impersonation that is done on the Harley Quinn show, matched with the characterization of that version of Bane, kills me. I love it. And I have nitpicks about that show. I do, but Bane is not one of them because I think he's hilarious. And it could be, you know, it feels like it could be overdone at times, but no, they nail it. And just some of the like Bane being sexually frustrated all the time is kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
like like it's a little on the nose because of the the kind of steroid
Yeah, exactly.
aspect of the character,
Yep.
but it's funny. So yeah, I I haven't heard anything recently. But would you be excited for Bane to come back in another comics run? I mean, because it doesn't sound like you like the Tom King run very much with Bane. I didn't either. So what do you think? Would you like to see another portrayal of him coming up, or would you like to see him in any upcoming movies?
Yeah, I'm always open to see more of him. I think the problem is because he's always made such an impact. It's like, how do you do something different with him? What is his motivation other than just breaking Batman? And how do you introduce that again in a different way than what Tom King did, or a different way of what Nightfall was? Even it's hard. It's hard to find that. I think you could do it in a movie because people are more willing to accept that it's just an adaptation of something we've seen before. But in a comic, you really need to make it
Hmm.
fresh. So it's hard. Uh, I don't like. That's why I'm not even. I don't mean to criticize Tom King because it's not easy to bring the character in, and I think he did a good job. It just his writing just isn't for me, and I admit that. I just yeah, I'm always open to seeing more of Bane. It is just tough because it's hard to bring Bane in for one or two issues. Like how do you bring Bane in for just one or two issues and to make it interesting? It usually does have to be this long
Hmm.
sweeping thing. And how do you what makes your story different from the last guy? And I because we haven't gotten so many of them, I feel like there's got to be a reason. It's got to be tough to crack that code.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Bane recently. I feel like that is an issue that writers are facing is because they don't really know exactly what to do with him. Because the most recent appearances outside of Tom King's have mostly just been, him being either controlled by someone else or being a pawn of someone else or that kind of thing. Like he was kind of in the Hush animated film very much the same way in like the White Knight
Mm-hmm.
books. As much as I love Sean Murphy's writing and that world, Bane's kind of a throwaway in that world.
Well,
Um,
if I remember, it's
so
funny you say
it,
that. Even in like No Man's Land, he becomes like a an assassin for hire. Like so that, and I think
yeah, exactly.
that's even how he's brought into the animated series. And I will say, I think the animated series is probably the most comic accurate version we've seen, which usually is the case with the animated series. Um, but yeah, it seems like that's the way they were using him for a while. Was almost like you say a pawn or like I do. It's almost like why wouldn't he be someone you go after if you want someone killed? It makes sense, but it wasn't utilizing him to his fullest potential. But again, you got to do something different with him once in a while, and it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't envy that task for any of the creators.
And I think that speaks to the
But I
brilliance of
do think,
Nightfall. Like I say it's long and
yeah,
it's too
yeah.
long, but it obviously had such a huge impact that it's hard to you can't deny what it's done for the character.
And it's funny you say that because it's almost like every time I try to read Nightfall now, I've made it all the way through it again a few times, but usually it's like once I get past that moment where Batman gets broken by Bane, once I get into the Azrael stuff, I'm just not as interested. You know,
I
it's
I try to
it's
read
like once
different parts
once
of
you
it.
get past Bane. Hmm.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all I was going to say was once you get past Bane, it's just kind of like, well, the thrill is a little gone now.
Yeah, I actually try to read like because I don't think I've ever read the entire thing, like as far as like every single
Hmm.
tie-in issue. There was always stuff missing from the versions I was reading. So now what I would try to do is like read the main core issues, but like skip some tie-ins and go to other ones. Um, there's so many like I'm trying to remember if I ever even read like is it the Crusade? Is the Tim Drake stuff? And then there's the something else with um Bruce being nursed back to health. There's more in-depth stuff with that. There's definitely a
Hmm.
bunch of different side stories with that I try to like branch out and read different versions of it just because if you read them all in one shot it is a lot.
Yeah, it becomes almost a daunting task to look at all those books and be like, oh. But yeah, as for myself, talking about what we'd like to see in the future, I mean, I'm down to see Bane in any aspect. I do love seeing him in Harley Quinn. I love the video game versions we've gotten for him. I think the Arkham series did a really good job with Bane. Um, and yeah, with this new DC universe starting on film, I would really love to see another, another director take a big screen swing at Bane. Um, Somewhere in between the comic book look of Jeep Svensson and the great characterization of Tom Hardy. I'd love to see a little more, and I hate this term, but comic accurate Bane. I'd love to see it.
I think the Tom King Bane would work really well for a film. I think that is the perfect balance there.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I'll give Tom King props there. I do agree with that. But anyway, other than that, is there anything else that you wanted to mention or we left out that you really wanted to get out there about Bane before we move on, Joe?
No, that's pretty much it with him. I will say if anyone has some story recommendations, please send them our way. Um, if you have any stories that you really love that Bane's involved in, that maybe they are like one or two issues, like short stories that maybe we missed. Um, I mean, I'm sure we missed some because we really didn't name too many that were, that weren't the biggies. So please send them over because I would love to check them out.
Absolutely. Yep, I second that. I would love some more Bane recommendations. I'm sure there's some stories out there that I have not read. So yeah, shoot them our way. If you have any favorite Bane stories or any kind of hidden gems, let us know. But I think that's a great spot there to move on. So happy 30 years to Bane, and we look forward to seeing more of him in the future. But we're not ready to leave you guys yet. We actually have quite a few, or not quite a few. We have a couple of emails here that we wanted to make sure that we read. So we we did have a little more stretch between this episode. We had 3 weeks instead of our normal two, and it kind of worked out because we got a few more emails. So our first one here, Joe, is from Jonathan Mercado, and it says, "Greetings, Eric and Joe. Just listened to your episode on the rankings on your top 5 Batman voice actors, and it got me thinking of what my rankings would be. And here we go. Number 5, Peter Weller. Number 4, Diedrich Bader. Number 3, Will Friedle. Number 2, Jensen Ackles. And number 1A and B, Kevin Conroy and Bruce Greenwood. My 5 and 4 could be a revolving door of talented voiceover actors. There's so many of them, and they bring their own take to our beloved Batman. Keep shining that bat signal. Love the show and look forward to each episode. John." Well, John, thank you so much for that email. But having Will Friedle on your list, I think that's going to get you off of Joe's Christmas card.
Yeah, I noticed you
Just
paused on
saying.
Will Friedle for me. I appreciate that. You almost emphasized that a
I
little
did
bit
that just
more.
for you.
Yeah. I don't hate Will Friedle. I
I
love
did.
Will Friedle. I just it wasn't one that I would include because I wasn't going that way. But that's fine.
Well, John, I love your list here, and I love the variety you have. I mean, Peter Weller and Diedrich Bader, those are kind of two complete opposite sides of the Batman spectrum. So that's really cool to see some variety there in your list. But I think that's a great list, and I love that you put Will Friedle on there, even if Joe doesn't.
Yeah. I'm very bitter about it.
All right, but we'll move on to the next one here, and this is from Grant Nichols. And Grant says, "Hey guys, love your show. Found both of you while listening to the Batman Book Club and have listened to your show ever since your The Batman review. An idea I have, and it may already be on your radar, but Batman Mask of the Phantasm hits its 30th anniversary this year. This is my favorite Batman story of all time and would love to hear an episode dedicated to it. Thank you, Grant." Well, Grant, thank you so much for your email. Batman Mask of the Phantasm is a very popular film amongst this show. And absolutely, I would love to do a Mask of the Phantasm episode. What do you think of that, Joe?
Yeah, I think I can handle that. I think I've even said on the show before, that's one of those ones that I watch all the time. And my wife will walk in the room and just be like, "You're watching this again? Like, what is it about this one that you watch all the time?" And I'm just like, why not? Like I could watch that movie probably once a week and it wouldn't even phase me. Like I love that movie. So I would love to cover it here. Um I can't believe I didn't even realize it was his 30th anniversary. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. 93. Now, the interesting part of that one is it came out Christmas Day.
Yes, it came out in December. I
So,
remember.
so the interesting thing is, like, logistically, do we do that one? We can't do that one as a Christmas episode, but I think we can do a December episode on Mask of the Phantasm. I think we can make that work.
Yeah, we got to see how
Um,
the weeks end up. Maybe we could do it in between if we have time, or maybe we'll figure something out there.
Yeah, but either way, we're definitely going to cover Mask of the Phantasm this year for its 30th anniversary. But thank you so much for that recommendation, Grant. That does jog our memory there and make sure we keep we keep it front of mind. And thank you for listening since the Batman review. That was a really fun one. And I feel like that kind of got some we kind of picked up some listeners from that one, Joe. So it seems to have worked out.
Yeah, and it's nice that he found us from the Batman Book Club with Ryan. That was fun
Yeah,
doing that
absolutely.
episode I did with Ryan. I still got to get back on there. We've been trying to figure something out. I got to go back on there and cover. I think I got to cover Endgame since I did Death of the Family. So that's a long time coming.
Well, funny you should say that. I think, and I'm not going to set it in stone because you know how podcasting goes, but I'm pretty sure that I'm visiting the Batman Book Club fairly soon.
I can't
So
imagine what you'd be
keep
covering.
your.
Does it rhyme with? It's got to be a Sean Murphy thing.
I don't know what you're talking about. Moving on. uh, our next one is Stuart from Guernsey. So Stuart says, "Hey guys, it is Stuart. Great episode. I love both of your picks." And he's talking about the voice actors' picks. Here is my top 5 voice actors, and he kind of gave us a little rundown after each pick. He says 5, Peter Weller. His voice matched the tone of The Dark Knight Returns so well. I'm not sure how well it would fit in other Batman shows, though. Number 4, Adam West. He was my first Batman in animation. This was about 4 to 5 years before BTAS premiered. Number 3, Bruce Greenwood. Perfect Batman voice. I'm glad he got to show more of it in Young Justice. Number 2, Jason O'Mara. This guy is so underrated. His voice is near spot on. If we lived in a world where Kevin never became Batman, Jason would be the standard for me. His voice is the second voice I hear in my head when I read comics. Depending on the story, I either hear him or I hear Conroy. And number 1, Kevin Conroy. He said, "I know this was the obvious choice, but I couldn't not mention him. What else can I say? The legend will never be topped. We miss you, Kevin." Well, thank you so much, Stuart, for your continued support, and thank you for your email. Love your list here. Again, a lot of variation, a lot of variety there. Kevin Conroy, absolutely. He has to be number one. That's why we kind of did a 1A on our episode, but absolutely no fault there listing him as number one. And we do miss him. Some interesting choices there, though, Joe. I love how much he went to bat for Jason O'Mara. I know you're really high on O'Mara.
I really yeah, I love that list. I was really high on Jason Amara, and I was not a fan of him on the first film he did. It was a little different for me, but I think once he fell into that role, and I've said so on the episode, I really just grew to love his performance. And I got to say, I love him talking about Adam West. I spoke about Adam West
Oh
on our
yeah.
episode, and I think he doesn't get enough credit for his voice work because we always just go right to thinking about the show. So I think
Hmm.
it's cool that he's getting some props there too. And thank you very much for the email to everybody. I
Yeah,
didn't say it to the last two, but thank you guys very much for sending in the emails.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. But yeah, thank you for the emails. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for continued support of the show, everyone who listens. But I think that is a great spot for us to put a pin in this episode, Joe. But until next time, thank you so much for joining me once again. And why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as jforn11. And you can find me on Facebook as Joe Fornerato, Fornarotto. And thank you again for having me on here. And maybe next week we'll do a Guardians Volume 3 roundtable.
Ooh, if if we did Marvel on this show, I would love to talk about that movie, but
Not quite.
we don't. So we're gonna hold off. But yeah, check out my letterbox. You'll see what I think. But yeah, Coming up, Joe, we're going to be doing some lead up stuff into the Flash. I don't know if that's going to be the next episode, but I'm really excited about
Yeah,
that.
we
So
are
everybody, keep
close.
your.
What do we have? 3 episodes left?
We're get.
3 or 4?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy how close comes up quick, man.
it is.
I got to see the
It is
trailer
June
again
16th.
today.
I cannot wait. Nice. Oh yeah, because you went to see Guardians.
Yep,
That's right.
got to see that trailer again
All
on
right,
the big
well,
screen.
Without rambling further, thank you again, Joe, for joining. If you'd like to find me, my personal accounts can be found on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at mecarter89. That's mecarter89. The show can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at TFR Batpod. And if you'd like to support the show in any way, the best way to do that is to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can also leave us a star rating on Spotify. If you leave a written review on Apple Podcasts, we will read those on the show. We also read emails like the ones we read today. So if you'd like to get your voice heard, just send us an email at tfrbatpod@gmail.com. Another way you can support us, and we don't ask that you spend any money on this show, but if you'd like to, you can go to redbubble.com and search Shop TFR, all one word, and find our logos on all kinds of cool stuff there. Our theme music was created by Gaurav Venkateswar. His music can be found on gvtunes.net. But that's going to do it for this episode of TFR. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and until next time, make sure you keep that bat signal lit and pointed skyward.
Batman was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane and is the sole property of Warner Bros. Discovery. The Fire Rises, a Batman podcast, is in no way associated with Warner Bros. Discovery, DC Comics, or DC Studios. The thoughts and opinions of the participants of this show are their own and do not represent the companies that they work for. Thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
Stop.
Me. She even sounds like you.
Oh, I don't think I... So do I sound like... You never hear your own voice, I guess.